Good evening and welcome. Tonight I've got a rather special show. My guests are one of the most famous married couples in the world. Their wedding was a major event. It was beamed by satellite to every continent where eager viewers sat glued to their sets. They were drawn by the pageantry and pomp at which British royalty excels.
This woman to be married to this man.
The crowds watching were as captivated by this wedding as they would have been if it had been one of their own family. Indeed, the audience felt that here were characters that they knew. They'd seen them on films and on magazine covers. They'd eagerly devoured everything that the press had told them. For Her Royal Highness the Princess Anne, the spotlight had been on her since her earliest days. The world, through the media, had watched her grow up. As a child, she was scrutinized. Her adolescence was news. And her first royal tours made headlines as she met world leaders. Often her portrayal in the press has not been kind. She's been rarely portrayed as the fairy tale princess. And of course, she's not that. Princess Anne and Mark Phillips are real people behind their press image. Her Royal Highness will be my guest after this break. Welcome back. Would you welcome, please, Her Royal Highness, the Princess Anne. Your Royal Highness, we were looking there to some of the film of you growing up and did it bring back memories, did it?
I couldn't quite place those bumper cars.
You couldn't? You've forgotten that?
I think that must have been Bertram Mills's Circus, Olympia, Christmas show.
Yes. Yeah, they're a rather nice shot, that, actually. I like that one.
Yes, well...
You would, yes. But I suppose it brought back memories of royal touring, and you did, in fact, your first royal tour in 1970, I think I'm right in saying.
Yes, that was the first major one. I'd been on one short state visit before that, but not on a long tour.
And that was, in fact, a tour that brought you to Australia.
Cook's bicentenary celebrations. We came through the Pacific and New Zealand and east coast of Australia.
What kind of memories do you have of that particular tour, particularly of Australia?
Well, we'd, for various reasons, I mean, the itinerary is a little bit jumbled in the order, but I can always remember coming to Sydney Harbour on the yacht, which was quite the best way to arrive, of course, by sea. That was a tremendous impression. And most, of course, that, because it was Cook bicentenary, was a bit on the coast. I mean, we didn't really do too many travels inland. But my brother and I went for 2 nights on a cattle station in Queensland. We were allowed a couple of days off to do that, which was great fun. And that, you know, we saw a little bit more of the countryside. And we did occasionally sneak inland. There was a... don't ask me where it was, because I simply can't remember. We went to an agricultural college. The Queen went to the agricultural college, and we went along for the ride. But there were still 1 or 2 sort of noisy students about in those days. You know, it was end of the 60s anyway. And there was a slightly noisy group on arrival, and we all thought, you know, I wonder what they're up to, sort of thing. And 3 of them pushed out of the crowd with this hand, and it was a sort of stuffed glove, for want of a better expression, on a joint.
And, you sort of waved it like this.
They just moved like
that.
Yeah. And these 3 presented it to the Queen, I think thinking they were being really rather daring and rather cheeky. And the Queen took it from them and said, "Thank you very much. That is what I've always wanted." And their faces literally dropped, because this wasn't quite the reaction they'd expected. And of course, it was exactly what she'd always wanted.
Yes.
Because there it was, you sat, you know. Unfortunately,
you weren't able to use it?
Somehow it got lost. I'm not sure that somebody's sense of humour didn't stretch quite as far as ours. We've never seen it again, so if they're watching, perhaps they'll
send it back.
make us another one.
Yeah. What about, I suppose it was on that tour too that you got your first indication of how strenuous touring was.
Yes, I think you only learn these things, I'm afraid, through experience, and it was quite an experience. The first part of the tour, it started in Fiji and came through Tonga and on to New Zealand, and we were in New Zealand for about a week. And again, my brother and I were allowed a couple of days on a sheep station in New Zealand, sort of west of Christchurch. And that was about the first day off we'd had since we'd arrived. And there had been a lot of shaking hands and chatting and the walkabouts, which of course more or less started about then. Mm-hmm. And that night, I found myself, I kept trying to wake myself up because I was absolutely convinced that I was in the middle of a room full of people and that I was supposed to be talking to them, and actually what I was doing was lying down in the midst room full of people, and I just couldn't get up to talk to them. And eventually I woke myself up and it was 2 o'clock in the morning or something, and it was
a nightmare.
I should have been fast asleep and enjoying myself. Yeah. Yes, it was rather a vivid sort of nightmare.
It was interesting there that you said that nobody teaches you these things about royal tours, and in fact you just sort of pick it up. I mean, it's assumed in the press, we hear about people being groomed for royal tours. It's supposed to be happening to Princess of Wales now. That's not so.
No, there isn't a school for royalty, really. I'm afraid it comes with experience. If you ask the questions, you may get the answer, but you rather tend to have to ask the questions before you get an answer.
Yes.
Because people you grow up with it, so they rather think you know everything. And
yes,
you don't.
They assume.
I mean, you do actually have to learn, and experience, I'm afraid, is the only way.
And in that experience, what were the problems? In that tour, you would be the third in line, wouldn't you, as such, on that tour we were talking
Fourth,
about?
Actually, because
Fourth,
my brother was there as well.
Yes, and I think you once described it as being tail end Charlie.
Yes.
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 What,
He thought he was tail end Charlie. I was tail end Annie, but...
Tail end Annie.
It had its own problems, which of course are very much more obvious to one now, but you can see it in retrospect. Somehow when you were starting, you were so busy trying to do things properly and not get in people's way, and everybody comes to see the Queen, Duke of Edinburgh, and you didn't really think that you were of much interest, and really you were trying to stay out of trouble. In fact, you got into more trouble probably by doing that, because you weren't looking the right way or saying the right thing, or reacting in the same way as you would have been had you been up front and doing it all by yourself. And of course, in fact, later, if anything, it becomes more difficult, because the more you get used to doing things on your own, the more difficult it becomes to work with other people. But to begin with, you're very much conscious of staying out of the way and just sort of coming along at the back.
Are there any tricks of the trade, Mum, about meeting people, walkabout, talking to people?
Yes, I think there probably are.
I now know the answer to my next question. What are they?
Oh, there are too many to go into.
What about the tours that you go on as president of the Save the Children Fund? One of the accusations, I suppose, made about royal tours is that that the members of the royal family who undertake them don't actually see much of the real people, of the real country that they go to. Is there a tendency on behalf of the organisers, perhaps, to protect you, to keep you away from where it's really grotty and really nasty?
I think when it comes to the people who work for the Save the Children Fund, no, that's not true, because they know me well enough, and I've been around for long enough where they're quite happy to take me and show me exactly what's going on. It may partially be true of some of the countries that I go to, but even then, the sort of work that the fund is doing, it's not necessarily in their best interests to do so. I mean, being honest about it, if there's going to be publicity as an end result of my visit, then in fact they'll get more help.
Is that basically how you see your role as president when you go on your tour, as being attracting publicity to a problem?
Partly. it certainly has that effect. It's also partly, I think, from the fund workers' point of view as well, that people don't forget about them because they're usually in very remote little places.
Do these people, I don't suppose they don't want know who you are, would they, a lot of them?
I shouldn't think so, no.
No.
I didn't stop to ask.
What kind of reception do they give you, though? I mean, is there sort of extraordinary curiosity, I suppose?
Yes, I mean, I had a tremendous reception. It couldn't have been nicer, and a great deal of jolly dancing and leaping up and down, and one or two strange gifts, and...
What was the strangest gift?
What about strangest, but the one that caused me most bother was I was given a pipe, and it was females for the use of. I mean, males get different pipes. This was a female pipe, and they're gourds, really, with a long stem, and a little thing where you put a hot coal in, and you fill the gourd with water, and it's one of those. But for some reason, which you'll have to ask him, but anyway, there was a journalist present who decided that it was a marijuana pipe. And that caused a certain amount of bother.
Bother? You were stopped and asked by customers when you got back?
The country in which I was at the time wasn't too impressed because they're rather strict about those sort of things.
Yes. Yeah.
And they got rather uptight about it. And, of course, this all went to the papers at home before you could say knife. And we eventually said, well, actually, it's not true. So then I had to turn around and say, well, it's just an ordinary pipe.
Yes.
But it was just a pipe, which I don't really have much use for.
No, I would imagine. Nor indeed any of your family, I would think.
Not really.
No. But, of course, on that tour, this was a tour where, in fact, you got, for once in your career, you got a very good press, didn't you?
Yes, well, you tell me that. It's very kind of you, but I didn't actually see any of it. So.
Well, you did. I mean, it was well written up, and we had none of the normal Princess Anne stories, about being gloomy and surly and rude and.
Yes. Well, it was I think the people who came to cover it were a slightly different variety of journalists. They were not so much serious. They'd actually come looking, I think, for what they thought I was going to behave like, and were very surprised by what I did, but B, were amazed by the places I went to and the sort of things I saw, because they just thought it was another royal tour. Well, I'd been on one of mine before, so...
It's a lot tougher than they thought, than they imagined.
Well, it was different.
Different.
It was different.
When in fact, can you date it, Ma'am, the time when you started getting the bad press? Would it have been that first trip to Australia?
I suspect it was, but I don't think... I mean, I'm not really conscious of it before that, but I suspect even before that I didn't really fit somehow the image that the media thought I ought to have. I think, princesses, as you come in sort of fairy story, That's what they are, and somehow I didn't fit.
You didn't quite fit that.
Yeah.
But I mean...
Still don't.
No. Does it bother you?
No, not really.
No. But it's that thing you made there about image, the point you made there, is quite true, of course. An observation, I think anybody who reads newspapers would see that seems to be a fairly selective proposition about depicting members of the royal family. I mean, for instance, the Queen is always seen to be laughing. I'm sure, Mum, that she doesn't laugh all the time.
No, she takes an intelligent interest in what's going on, which usually, it's difficult, I always think, to take an intelligent interest and wear a grin.
Yes, this is true. Could all rather silly, wouldn't it? Yeah. Yes. And again, Prince Charles too. I mean, he's exactly the same, and the Queen Mother.
But men can be more serious. They're allowed to be.
Yeah. The scales are tipped against women, you think?
Yes. Women aren't supposed to be funny either.
This is true. I suppose, yes, it's an interesting point because, they criticise you. They wouldn't criticise, for instance, a male member of the royal family about his dress. But his suit, not his... But certainly, of course, and we had an example while you've been here, the press picked up on the fact that you arrived wearing the same suit they claimed as you were wearing in 1978.
It's older than that.
It's older. How much has press scrutiny, though, of the royal family, or royalty, generally speaking, how much has that changed, do you think, over the years?
Well, I think it's availability and communication has changed, hasn't it? The technology has made it very much more available. But I doubt if it's... The intensity has probably changed very much. And I imagine that... I mean, in Queen Victoria's day, I mean, if you read the old Punch magazines and what have you, and they were very critical and very fierce about them. The cartoons were, you know, quite strong stuff. Mm. So whether it has, in fact, changed very much, I don't know. But the availability and the sort of type of communication available to them, I mean, through sort of television and satellites and what have you, has made it that much easier, certainly. And wherever you are, it's made it that much easier.
Yes,
no matter where you go, really.
Yes, so no way you can go where they can't follow, of course. But you, of course, as a public figure, must expect, of course, to be followed by the press, reported on. But you draw the line between the public and the private. I'm interested to find out where you draw that line.
Yes, well, I do draw a line because I think one of the features of modern life is that because your public life is even more easily scrutinised than it was in the past, that then your private life really becomes that much more important. And when I'm at home, that's private and expected to stay that way. Unfortunately, the grey area, which I consider to be private, is my competitive horse riding life, which is done in the public and done in the public eye, so to speak, and is, I think, treated by the media in exactly the same way as it would be if I was at an official function. And of course I don't treat it that way and can't really treat it that way, and you behave quite differently if you're under sort of competitive circumstances. And that's quite difficult to understand if you've never done it, so to speak, if you've never competed seriously at any level. So that is a grey area, yes. I mean, that's an area which I consider to be private, and the media consider to be public, really.
Well, when you talk about competing at a higher level, what you mean is that you're concentrating, that the adrenaline's flowing.
Yes, I think it's the concentration and the fact that, you know, you try to compete on more or less the same terms as other people who, at the competition.
So that when something goes wrong, that's when you're likely to sort of get very short-tempered with them?
No, because to be honest, when you're actually involved in the competition, within the confines of the dressage arena, for instance, or when you're actually on the cross-country course, or in the middle of the show jumping around, it's neither here nor there. I mean, while it's happening, you've got time to think about those sort of things, and you just keep going. No, I think it's the preparation which is the worst part. When you're building up to it is the worst part. The hanging around and waiting, or when you're doing the schooling before you actually get into the dressage. Well, that is the most critical time as far as the horse is concerned, because you want to get him as calm and collected as possible. And then if he gets upset, you know, the thing tends to fall apart a bit. So that's usually when tensions are.
Do you ever regret what you say to them? I mean, the report that went around the world was you told one photographer to naff off, I think it was. Do you wish to retract your choice of words, or? No. Well, there was several of them, actually. There's a selection.
Yes, they were running at the time. I was I'd been there for 3 days, same place, doing the same thing. And they'd had several opportunities to take photographs. And I appeared because the dressage arena was empty for a change of practice one. And I thought I'd just pop in here and have a little work. And they went charging over to the ring, and the horse went up went his head, up went his tail, and they all started dancing about. And I thought, thank you very much, you know. I haven't done it to anybody else, so. No, I don't. They asked for it.
Yes. And had you been a man, perhaps it might have been even more salty.
They wouldn't have objected,
They wouldn't have objected. You mentioned there about the way that you protect the privacy at home and your family, which begs the question, of course, about your children. And you go to extreme lengths, not extreme lengths, but you protect them, obviously, from, or try to protect them from this.
Yes.
Of course, it is a problem, isn't it? Because there has to be a balance, because inevitably there comes a point in their life when they have to understand that they will always be the objects of curiosity.
Yes,
I wondered how you went about that.
Well, it's a slightly difficult one to tell Being the Queen's first grandchild will be a label that'll be literally wrapped around his neck for the rest of his life. But quite how it'll affect his life in the long term is slightly difficult to tell. But I would imagine that it's far enough away from the working end of the family, so to speak, that he'll, you know, go and earn his own living. And that really you don't want to lumber them with all that much publicity when they're young. Because, you know, they've just got a lump in. Little clip of Dodgem Carson.
Yes, yes, right.
What you said to whom when you were... Yes, you don't remember me, but I met you when you were...
Yes. What about the business of privacy, though? I mean, taking it a stage further. I mean, you must find it fairly impossible to go on holiday, for instance. A holiday in the sense that we go on holiday. I mean, I go and sort of lie down on a beach in Spain or whatever.
Yes. Well, it's not so much difficult. I mean, it's possible. I'm just not sure that it's really worth it from my point of view, just to find somewhere where you can go where you're not going to get too bothered, or you know, that you know is a nice place, and you know, you get to know the place. That's not really... I mean, if a holiday to me is an ability to switch off and relax, and there are better places to go and do that than going abroad, so to speak.
What about the other business too? Like, now you're in Australia now, and it's not an official visit. It's not, and I suppose you were joking today at lunch about it being a holiday. But what about? I mean, in a situation like this, what kind of reaction do you get from people? Because you pop up in this situation in unexpected places, don't you? I mean, places where they would not expect to meet a princess. Well, I mean, what kind of reaction do you get then?
Well, sometimes it can be quite startling. I mean, I arrived on Saturday morning and went off to Werribee Park, which was where my husband was competing in a 3-day event, and that was cross-country day. And there were one or two fairly surprised people about then, because I just, you know, put on a pair of jeans and went off to watch, walked about and walked the course. And in fact, I had 2 or 3 conversations on my way around with people who were either riders or connected, who didn't seem to think it was very peculiar that I was there at all. But on Sunday, I was walking about, looking slightly less bohemian, and a lady came up to me, definitely on the lookout. I mean, she wanted to ask me where something was. And she got, "Do you know?" And then she went, "Ah!" and sort of passed by. Sort of 15 yards later, I still couldn't get out of her what it was that she meant to ask. So I gave up and carried on. I think she knows now.
She knows now that she is. Finally, Ma'am, can I ask you, you're over here, do you speak Australian?
Strine. Not strictly speaking, no. I don't... I mean, I enjoy listening to it, and I suppose inevitably one occasionally picks up the odd word. He's trying to get something out of me.
I'm trying to get something out of you. You told me a story today about when you came in, on your first tour, wasn't it?
Well, it was a story that I'd heard, and it was partly to illustrate the language, the problem, slight language problem. And it was apparently a true story, and last war, there was a general doing the rounds of the hospital, and there were some Australian troops in. And he'd been going round doing his bit and cheering up the men. But he's a British general. And he got to this bed where there was a fairly seriously injured Australian. And he said to him in an encouraging tone, you know, "You didn't come in here to die." And the man looked at him and said, "No," he said, "came in yesterday."
It's about time we brought the husband on now, I think, isn't it?
Yes, I expect.
As we're sitting so we'll do that after this break. For the moment, Your Honour Highness, thank you very much indeed. Thank you. We'll be back after break to meet Captain Mark Phillips. See you in a moment. Welcome back. Would you welcome now, please, Captain Mark Phillips. Were you very impressed with the performance?
I was listening with interest.
You were you? Can I ask you, first of all, Captain Phillips, it might sound a corny question, but it intrigues me. How did you first tell your parents that you were going out with Princess Anne?
Oh, dear. Well, I rang home from a phone box one day to ask if I could bring a girlfriend home for the weekend. And I just spoke to my mother and said that we'd be there in time for dinner and said how long we were staying and what time I'd be leaving and things. And was about to put the phone down and she said, and what's her name? And I said, Princess Anne. And there was a deathly pause at the other end of the phone and she says, you're joking? I said, no, I'm absolutely serious. She said, when did you say you were coming? I said, well, it's going to take me an hour and a half to get there. Yeah, I don't think I was very popular.
What kind of problems did you have, though, the two of you, when you were courting, I think is the old-fashioned word? I mean, before you were married?
Well, we didn't have a lot of problems, really. It was more the media sort of thing.
Well, that's what I meant,
trying to find time and places where we could be together and not be disturbed, sort of thing. Mm-hmm. And we had one or two interesting moments trying to escape the attentions.
Like what?
Well, I think you ended up travelling in the back of a horse box one day because when we were at home and the press would always sit on the gate, and so it was impossible to get out because wherever I went, we were followed. So I went out one day and Princess Anne was in the back with the horses and went off down the road and got to escape that way.
It was an enjoyable experience being in a horse box, no?
Well, I've been a much better driver of horses than ever since.
You have? You had some consideration. What other kind of subterfuge did you have to get up to? What about disguise? Did you ever disguise yourselves? Or?
Only once. I did do it once, actually. I don't quite know why I got it or where I got it from, but I did own a wig at one stage. And on one of his visits back from when he was stationed in Germany, he flew in, and I went to pick him up from the airport. And I put on this wig, which seemed to me to be, I wasn't getting out of the car or speaking to anybody, so, just thought, I'd try it.
But I
anyway,
didn't
I
know.
turned up.
But I didn't know. I saw the car, this car coming down the car as I was expecting something. And I thought it was best not to sort of hang about too much, so I chucked my case in the back and jumped in. And there's this strange girl in the driving seat. I thought, my God, I've got in the wrong car. I've been picked up. And anyway, and then you smiled and spoke, and it was all right.
And what about the other problem that we talked about? And that's about, well, with you, I suppose it's at times people not being able to sort of put a proper definition or title on you. You were saying at lunch today about when you were in Melbourne driving down to that toll gate. I mean, tell me that story. What happened there?
Well, that was very unfortunate because I was going back to the hotel with a friend, and I won't say we were racing to see who could get back to the hotel first,
But you were?
Well, and we come to the toll gate the toll on Westgate Bridge, and pull in, and I hand over my dollar note, and I get my 20 cents change, and I put the car into gear to go away, and the red light's still on. I think, oh no. I look round, and the chap's waving me back. And I thought, oh no, what have I done now? I've been speeding, or I've come in too fast, or I'm in trouble. So I reversed back up And he says, I recognise you. He says, you're that Royal Highness What's-it. He says, oh, it's all right, you can go now. and I'm thinking to something else, my $5 gone as well.
Lost to the race, yes. Can we talk about for a moment now about the more serious aspect of that the two of you share, and that, of course, is the problem of the danger that you are in just by being who you are. And let's talk specifically about the time in 1974 when there was a kidnap attempt made on you in the Mall in London. Can you tell me, tell us exactly what happened and your memories of that day?
It'll sound very disjointed and probably different, but the essence of the operation was this car overtook us and stopped. This was going up the Mall, what, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock? 8 o'clock at night, I suppose. And it was fairly empty. And the Mall isn't all that well lit either. And we were sort of more or less in the middle. And it pulled up a bit quick, and so the chap just stopped to avoid it. And this man got out of his car, ran back, and the policeman got out of his car, and he walked round the back of the car. And when he came round the back of the car, he realised that this man had a gun. And he shot. There was an exchange of shots, and the policeman got off one shot, which I'm convinced came through the back window of the car, because that all hit me on the back of the head, and that was a good start. And then unbeknownst to us, his gun jammed, so that he became useless, and he was also quite seriously wounded at that stage. And then the chauffeur tried to get out, and he got shot. But my problem is, and I'm not sure quite which order all these things happened, but the chauffeur, when he went to get out of the car, he was shot. And he stayed in the car, and then he opened the door, and we had a sort of discussion about where or where not we were going to go.
What did you say? What do you remember of the discussion? I mean, what did he say?
Well, he said I had to go with him. Can't remember why.
I don't think you really gave a reason why.
No, perhaps not.
But you were quite obstinate about it.
I said I didn't think I wanted to go. Thank you very much. I was scrupulously polite, because I thought it was silly to be too rude at that stage again. And we had a fairly low-key discussion about the fact that I wasn't going to go anywhere. And wouldn't it be much better if he just went away and we'd all forget about it? Which was, as it turned out, wishful thinking. And this discussion went on a little bit. Now, this discussion was interspersed with occasional bursts of activity from elsewhere, one of which was a policeman who'd sort of heard popping noises, and somebody told him to go and look. And he wandered over and literally tapped this man on the shoulder, because I don't think he realised it was gunshots. And he got shot, wounded, not fortunately seriously. And then we went back to having this rather sort of tedious discussion about not going anywhere.
There was a member of the public that came to have a look as well.
Well, there was, on my side of the car, there was a gentleman who'd obviously been walking down the far side of the Mall. And he walked all the way across the road, and he looked in through the window, and he went, so it is. And he turned around and he walked all the way. Went off down the Mall.
Extraordinary.
And I may not be right about the time scale, but that's just like a sort of photograph. I can see him doing it. And then off he went. And then it got slightly rougher, didn't it, at one stage, because we did, in fact, when he shot the policeman, we managed to close the door.
And eventually got the door back open again.
He got the door back open, but in the process of getting the door back open, the back of my dress split from top to... all the shoulders went out of it. And that was his most dangerous moment, because I lost my rag at that stage.
But he had hold of one arm and I had hold of the other.
That was a bit later, though, wasn't it? Because when after he'd opened the door again, the whole thing had collapsed a bit, and then he grabbed my arm and pulled. Unfortunately, well, I don't know whether it was me holding on to him or him holding on to me, but anyway, we maintained the status quo for a bit. So I wasn't going anywhere, put it that way. And then, at this stage, my policeman had managed to get back into the car from the other side. my lady in waiting had left. We told her to get out, and she did quite quickly. In fact, she was going to pick up the policeman's gun, but some bossy lady standing on the side told her not to touch it. Fierce tone. So, anyway, the policeman got back in, and he joined in the fray, and got shot again for his pains. And then somehow we all ended up on the floor, and I was lying, yes, flat on my back on the floor of the car, and you were basically sort of half on top. And that was just how we'd ended up after this tug of war. You know, the whole thing had rather sort of collapsed in a heap. But I could reach the door handle behind my head, and I opened the door and literally pulled the feet over my head and did a sort of backward somersault onto the road. And then waited, because I thought if I was out of the car that he might move. And he did eventually, and he went round the front of the car. I got back in the car and shut the door. And the police were there at that stage, and I said, "You, go on, now's your chance." And he then legged it off towards the park and was smothered by, I think, the local rugby team. Police rugby team.
Oh, yes, the policeman.
Actually, that was the most frightening part, was when the police actually arrived. And it took, what, 10 minutes or so before the police actually came. And when they did come, so rescue was so near, and yet it was so far, because then he was like a caged animal.
Well, while he was there, actually facing them with the gun, there was not much they could do about it, really.
Yes.
But the timescale was very difficult to judge, but there was a taxi driver who came past quite early on in the proceedings, and his fare wouldn't let him stop, and he went on, and he dropped him at Charing Cross station and came back again, and it was still going on.
It was as long as that, so at least 10 minutes,
About
15
that,
minutes or
I
something.
think.
What were your thoughts, Captain Phillips? I mean, when this extraordinary game of tug of war, this dialogue was going on, I mean, what... I just suppose there's anything you can do, really, is there? I mean...
It had never occurred to me that I might actually end up in that sort of situation. I think you probably had thought about it beforehand.
Yes.
So it was all a bit of a shock, and it was... I was frightened, I don't mind admitting it. But somehow, while we had a dialogue going, it didn't seem too bad, sort of thing, because we were able to keep talking and to keep arguing, or you know, and it was all right. It was, like I say,
He was slowly running out of bullets.
I was... You were counting, were you? You counted?
Yeah.
5, yes. You've seen all the movies.
Seen the movies.
Seen the movies, yes.
Yes.
But
He had 2 guns, which slightly spoilt them.
But you said that you had considered it, of course, before, Mum, and I suppose you had to consider the eventuality.
Yes, I don't know that one had to, but it was something that, I don't know, and just, you know, it just struck one as a possibility, and, you know, what would you do if? And I suppose the answer is, well, I don't know. I mean, I decided that I wasn't going to get out if if that particular situation arose. However, there was only one man. I mean, if there'd been more than one, that might have been a different story.
Yes, there'd have been a backup. I mean, it could have happened, couldn't it? Is it much more risky nowadays, do you think, being in your position than it was?
I doubt it.
Really?
I think, I mean, public figures have always been in danger to some degree. I mean, Queen Victoria had several attempts, I think 5 attempts.
That I didn't know.
During her reign, and mostly single people.
Yes.
Whether it's worse, that is in fact, perhaps your greatest danger is still the lone nutcase who's, you know, just got enough to put it together.
Rather than the organised terrorist
would be more difficult.
group.
But, I mean, it would be fair to say that if anybody was seriously intent on wiping one out, it would be very easy to do.
You've both been, of course, portrayed in so popular image, if you like, as being horse mad, and this is supposed to be the common bond that you have that brought you together. Would this be true?
Well, I never really quite think of myself as being horse mad. I mean, my horses have been my hobby for most of my life.
But not horse mad. I mean, you.
No.
No.
I remember when I met my headmistress for the first time, and she said she was a very nice woman, but she was rather sort of strict-looking lady, and we were having lunch, my parents and headmistress and me. She said, we do not encourage hippomaniacs, she said.
Hippomaniac?
Hippomaniacs. And my father looked at me and said, that does not mean you're mad on hippos.
Good. You're both, of course...
Never a danger.
No. You're both keen riders, both keen competitors, and have both compete at the topmost level. Does this lead to tensions in the family? I mean, do you criticise each other?
Well, I don't think you should... husband and wife shouldn't teach each other to drive anymore, or ride, rather, any more than they should teach each other to drive. I think sort of one of the sort of sad things is we never seem to have both been able to hit it off together on the same days. I think. Either one of us has a high and the other a low, or vice versa.
We've never had good horses going at the same time either, have we? In fact.
Well, but I mean, it's always can be slightly difficult like that. There's one driving home, one sort of on a bit of a high, and the other
depressed.
The other bit
yes,
depressed.
I mean, to put it mildly, one of them's complaining about having one fence down in the show jumping, and the other one's complaining about not getting round at all.
Is it rather sort of icy, then, is it, the atmosphere? Would that be fair to say?
No.
No.
But actually, it's been over the years, it's been a great help that when in training and things at home, if we've had a problem with a horse, and to be able to turn to the other and to ask Prince Anne to get on and to see what she feels and suggest some way of improving it. It's been a great help. So.
Could I ask you also too the other thing about the sort of things that attach themselves to people like you, inevitably in a sense, and those are the rumours that one hears about or reads about your marriage. There have been rumours recently about divorce and unhappiness. Are they true or untrue?
What are we doing here?
Should we leave by different doors?
We came in the same car. No, I think there's a lot of areas, in fact, which ill-informed gossip has been going on for years, in one sort or another. And I think, when they've got nothing better to do, they'll just think up a story, They think, oh, I'll sort of fit, Don't do this, that, and together, And the sort of lives we lead certainly do, we are apart quite a lot of the time. But there are an awful lot of other working couples who suffer from the same problems.
Yes.
I think it's probably accentuated at the moment, and that you've only got novice horses at the moment, and therefore haven't tended to be going to the same competitions that I've been going to. They've always perhaps seen less of each other in that respect than...
Yes. But how do you react when you read these stories? I mean, what is your feeling?
Well, it's a difficult question to answer. And that it depends, I think. I think to a large extent you ignore them. I think, but then if they start to persist and go on and on and on, then it starts to become a bit trying, and you eventually feel that I feel that I'm sort of dying to get an opportunity to say something to knock it all over.
Yes. And can I, finally, in the last couple of minutes we've got left, ask you, I mean, of all the things that you do now, would you both be happiest, do you think, in the future down at Gatcombe Manor, out of the public eye?
It would certainly be very nice to spend more time there, because certainly I miss out on a lot of the farming side of it, because I'm just not there consistently enough. But I do live there, contrary to a lot of people's belief. I mean, people tend to say to me, where do you live? I live in the country. Yes, but, in the week when you're, I actually live there. I only go up to town when I have to.
And what about you, Captain Phillips? I mean, would that be your idea of a contented life down there?
Yes, and I'm very happy there, and I live and work there, and because I'm rather more involved in the farm, spend a lot more time there. But I have certain responsibilities, duties, if you like, in other respects, which I regard as a job to go and do as and when I'm required. So.
Could I finally ask you, ma'am, one of all the stuff I've read about you in doing this interview, there's one very intriguing quote of yours that I'd love to ask you about. To end with. You were once asked a question about if you could spend a day as a commoner, what job you would do, and you answered that you'd like to drive a lorry. Now, is this so? I mean, was that just a whim of the moment?
No, I think it was more precise than that, because I wanted to know how I was going to earn my living.
Ah.
And as I've got an HGV licence, and I don't mind spending time on, you know, on one's own driving. You'd be more or less. I think you could run your own life that way. You know, you could put in a lot of hours for a period of time and leave yourself with a bit of time at the end of it. It wouldn't be such a bad way of doing it. And
we thought we'd make a
good pair, because he's got an HGV licence.
You could set up in business, couldn't you? Driving around the country, having a goods vehicle licence.
Yes.
But thank you both very much for being my guest tonight. I've enjoyed it. I hope that you have too. Your Royal Highness, Captain Phillips, thank you very much indeed. Thank you. My special guests were Her Royal Highness the Princess Anne and Captain Mark Phillips. From all of us here, until the same time next week, a very good night. Good night.